Okay, yards are getting decimated right now. If you've looked at your lawn, your flower beds, leaves are turning brown, brown areas all over the grass. But there is relief. There's a little bit of rain coming on our way, but now's the perfect time to get out there and water your yard. Let's talk about why before the storm is a good time to water. Okay, so before we dive into the watering side of things, we should probably discuss what's been going on. If you haven't been watching, in August I noticed we got into this really humid, cloudy period where we were getting rain, but I can't say we were necessarily getting a lot of volume of rain. And what was happening is the plants were still growing, the ground was starting to dry up a little bit, and then that we also started noticing diseases. And I'd say the first 2 to 3 weeks of August, diseases were just running rampant all over the place. And they were hitting patches of lawn. So that's why in August you would notice maybe big patches of your grass were just green and holding their own, not really growing that fast, but then all of a sudden just brown. And customers were actually thinking they were grubs, but it was a bit early for grubs. But I have to say, in the last 10 days, I went away on travel for 10 days. When I came back, I knew mentally that when I looked into the gardens, it was going to be the transition between kind of a summer feel when I left and a fall feel when I got back. Nights were cooling off, all the fall plants were coming into their own. However, I was not anticipating this. So when I left, a lot of my plants were looking like this. Overgrown, still flowering, holding on to their own, but at the same time, I just wasn't around to tell. The problem was they were getting too big, needed to be cleaned up. But when I look at them, the plants are healthy. And but the difference is, right on the other side of this fence, there was a large maple tree. When I that we lost in a lightning strike, and these plants are holding their own. But as I transition over the course of the garden, and I start getting to areas that are at the base of other maple trees, and then an even bigger maple tree, this is just what I was noticing. And as I looked around in the landscapes, this was what was happening all over the place. The ground is just so dry in some pockets that the leaves are just dropping off of plants. Now, will they die from this? Most of the time, no. Most plants are handling it just fine. They're just going dormant. It's a reaction to the plants to say, oh no, there's no moisture, it's close to fall, I'm just going dormant. And they just abort all their leaves. You can see with some of the perennials, as I get down to the bottom, they're nice and green down below where they're shaded. It's just a little bit of growth at the bottom. That'll be my growth for the next season. But all the stems are just dropping. As I get over, this area always gets competition with the tree on the other side and this big maple tree. And its roots are just riddled through here. So without being given any supplemental watering, all my perennials, all my shrubs over here, they're just turning and dropping their leaves. Now it's an interesting time because when you look around landscapes, some yards, grass is still looking good. Other areas, you'll notice it's all brown out in the middle of the yard, but when you get under the trees, it's green and looking more lush. It really all depends on the nature of the tree that it's underneath there. What's happening is the trees are shading those areas, which is then stopping the soil from baking in the sun and protecting that grass underneath it to a degree. But there is a fine point in that scenario. Behind me, with these large trees and large maples that have aggressive root systems, and they're Norway maples, so they're not native, they're just sucking up a tremendous amount of water. And I will most likely lose all that grass in the next month if we don't get rain. If we don't get rain. And I routinely have to reseed that area because those trees are just out competing the grass for all the moisture. And then what happens is in that area, the trees actually kill that patch of grass. In most yards, the grass is just going dormant, but it's going dormant weird. It's going dormant in patches. And really what that is, if you have areas in your yard that you reseeded last fall, if you have areas in your yard where you just planted trees or shrubs last fall or this spring, just because they've been green and growing all season does not mean that they are going to handle this level of drought if we don't start getting significant rain, because everything is cooling off and the plants are trying to go through one more flush, especially the grass. The grass is trying to grow, but it's going dormant, more dormant than it was historically in the summer, which is tough because grubs are around. So grubs are starting to kill patches of grass because the grass is kind of like going into dormant mode, and then now these little baby grubs are in there, and they have to go from baby grubs to big grubs before winter sets in, and they can just decimate lawns. And so you really want to take a look at your yard. If you don't really care, let it go dormant. Yes, you may lose some patches to grubs, but if you reseeded areas, invested effort into planting in the spring or planting in the fall, you need to start supplementing some water to baby them through this until we get significant rains. And I don't mean just a little thunderstorm. I mean like day-long rains, real saturations to get that moisture down deep. That's why we just started this conversation with, there is some storms coming, or there are some storms coming. Now's the perfect time to water. Why? Okay, so here's my thought on watering right before storms. Right now, if you've ever taken a brand new sponge, the ground is solid. It's going to resist absorbing any water. That's why in August, when it was summertime, things were drying out, but we were getting that dreary weather with some rain, but the soil wasn't really absorbing a lot of it because it wasn't substantial rains, long, drawn-out rains. Now that's what's going to happen with some of these storms that are coming through. It looks like we're going to get a few hours here, a few hours there. So yes, there is some level of relief that happens, but not substantial. Not when your soil is powder, 12 inches down, 14 inches down. So what I do is I get out there, and the areas that I want to protect, like those areas we were just looking in my garden, I'm going to run the sprinklers, and I'm going to get some moisture in that ground. It's kind of like when you buy a brand new sponge. The minute you go to put water on that brand new sponge, it actually resists water right up front. So you got to put some water on it, let it suck it up, then it absorbs moisture really fast. Your soil is the same way. It's going to repel and resist absorbing any water. So if we get there, and also if you have mulch on your flower beds, that mulch, if you have thatch in your yard, those are all going to act like little mini sponges. They're going to suck up a little bit of moisture that's coming. So if you've got trouble areas, get the hose out there, give it a good saturation, not by hand for a few minutes here and there. Get a sprinkler, let it run for half an hour, 45 minutes, really try to get some moisture in there. And then when we get these little batches of storms like this, the grass is going to start sucking up that moisture more. You're going to get more bang for your buck from Mother Nature. And as much as I don't necessarily like irrigation, it has its point. Right now, I'm watching shrubs that were planted in the spring and the fall. If people are not watering, I'm watching them just shrivel up in the landscapes and dies. And those plants will die. Planted last year, it's still young. It's not going to handle droughts very well, depending on the species. Same thing with the grass. I have lawns that I'm seeing that were renovated last year, looked beautiful all season long, and then all of a sudden, they're just going brown, and some areas that are chronically problem areas, so we all have it. We all have yards where there's just patches that always tend to turn brown and die easy. There could be bedrock underneath there. It could be poor soil. It could be anything. But those areas that are always problem childs, want to give them some supplemental water right now just to avoid needing to do a full renovation. Hope that helps. Take care.